Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I want to continue on with regards to why your child might not be listening, and that can go so much more than what I talked about the other day in terms of being able to tell that your child maybe not being able to discriminate between background and foreground noise and so forth. So today I want to tell you about a client, Noah, who was not described as lazy like my last client, but was seen as defiant, not doing his work, choosing not to do it, because in certain areas of school and life, Noah was pretty darn smart. So it really didn't appear like he could have any learning or processing issues. And he didn't have a whole lot of problem focusing, maybe somewhat, but nothing like, the ADHD was not flagged at all. So a lot of people, I don't want to say a lot, maybe teachers, a few teachers, dad, certain family members thought that he was just a bad kid and was just choosing not to behave and so forth. And so Noah's problem was not that he was straining to listen to foreground noise or trying to focus, for example, on the teacher's voice, and was actually getting distracted by stuff in the background like I talked about on Tuesday. What his issue is misinterpreting whenever the information would come through his auditory pathway, so his ear and into his brain. What would happen is he would misinterpret that information and it would get kind of jumbled up and he would hear bits and pieces of it. And so to certain parents or people or teachers, that can look a lot like defiance, especially when a child is smart in certain other areas or just in general, and it doesn't really look like a typical learning disability or behavior problem. So it's why it's important to understand auditory processing issues and to understand the different types and areas of breakdown, because it does not always look the same, right, in terms of where the breakdown is occurring in the brain. So basically we want to find what's going on, find out specifically what's going on for that child, because it looks so different each child, so that we can address it accordingly. So basically Noah's ability to follow instructions and do what's been asked of him or do his work correctly no longer looked like he was being defiant or careless or sloppy or just, oppositional. He was able to do it whenever we address that. So today I'm going to go through, though, the different areas of auditory breakdown. The other day I talked about auditory figure ground, so that was background to foreground noise and so forth. I talked about auditory attention. Today I want to talk about number 1, auditory memory. So that refers to being able to remember a series of lists or instructions or directions and so forth. These are the kids where you say, brush your teeth, or eat your breakfast, brush your teeth, get your backpack and do this, and they might do 1 or 2 things. Or the teacher says, okay, you need to do this, this, and this, and these kids don't follow those instructions, and maybe they do 1 or 2 things, or maybe they don't do any, and that can look a lot like defiance. And then there's auditory discrimination, which is a bit different than that foreground and background noise. What can happen when there's problems with this is problems with reading and spelling. So when kids have problems with auditory discrimination, it's the difficulty with a slight difference in sound, like the B's and the P's, or the T's and the D's. And that's where we're going to have problems with reading, with spelling, with blending sounds, even with remembering phonic sounds and so forth. And this can even cause impairments in speech, because a lot of speech difficulties don't start with what the mouth is doing. It starts with the auditory processing and how the brain is processing sounds in the auditory cortex. And so a lot of parents come to me after they've tried speech therapy with no results. And I tell them that's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. The mouth can't do what the brain is unable to process. Auditory sequencing refers to recalling info in order. So again, these are the types of kids, they might have a hard time retelling what happened in the story correctly, or even in real life, an event, something happens outdoors with their friends and somebody got hurt, and you get the story from someone else and the story is totally different. Their stories just don't make sense of either what happened at school or whatever. And so what can happen with sequencing is it can be life events. It could be a story in terms of what they're retelling, but it could also be in reference to like blending sounds. So they might blend the second letter of the word before the first one. So they're mixing up sounds, or they're mixing up words when they're speaking. It can affect a whole lot of stuff with reference to language. And so you can see why it's so important to know where the auditory breakdown is happening, because it's not enough to just work on that. We have to work on the weakness in the brain in terms of where it's occurring. Then we can work on the skill, whether it's reading, spelling, or whatever. Once we strengthen that weak connection, then we can build that skill where there is a learning gap. And I'm going to be talking more about this, by the way, in my live training that I will be doing November 21st, Saturday, November 21st at 10 a.m. So I'll post the link in the comments below. So make sure you join that. And so continuing on, auditory cohesion. So this is more common with kids who have autism spectrum, have social anxiety or social challenges, because they have a harder time telling, like differentiating like tone of voice, or telling, picking up on tone of voice, or reading tone of voice and sarcasm. And they might have a hard time making connections between certain things or making inferences. It's those subtleties that they have a hard time with, particularly when it comes through the auditory system. And so this usually has to do with a right brain deficit, if you will. So the right side of the brain is weak, and so forth. But there's obviously a lot more to it than just that. And so basically you will see, like I said, these kids might struggle with making friends. They might struggle with, ticking people off because they say things incorrectly, or being easily hurt because they're misinterpreting the way things are being said. And so again, you want to identify where the breakdown is happening, because once you identify where the breakdown is happening, you can strengthen the weak connection and then work on the skill specific to the learning gap that has occurred because of that weak connection. And I can't stress that enough. It's all about identifying the root cause. Otherwise, tutoring and all of these, attempts at building skills is going to be not as effective. And once again, I will be talking about that in my free live training on November 21st at 10 a.m. I will post the link in the comments below for that. And let me know in the comments below, where are you seeing areas of breakdown with your child? Does any of this sound familiar? And how are you trying to help them work with that at this point? So thanks for watching. And if you like this video, please share.